So hey, this is Saúl Sharma, and I'm currently a software dev at Logic. And many of you guys may, or maybe some of you guys may have seen some of my clones over the last year. These are not from App Store. These are not from Play Store. These are all built on React Native. I just open source them. It's out there on GitHub. So today, we have a very important topic. I think, I know this is the last talk of the day. I hope you have some energy for this talk. So our topic for today is how do we build the best React Native apps that has premium feel and quality UX. So before we get into our main topic, let's ask to ourselves, what is the biggest problem we have with our React Native apps? Take a few seconds, and in the next slide, try to make sure you get it right. I don't think it's going to be very much common problem, but because I've built so many of those top apps, I see a lot of difference between our React Native apps versus those top apps. So the biggest problem I see within our React Native community is what I call it web in a box. So what could it be, web in a box? So these apps you see right here, these are, I extracted the screenshot from React Native subreddit, Expo subreddit. Some of the apps are from Twitter, people sharing their apps. So these are what I call web in a box. Obviously, I think on average, maybe we build better apps than these, but this is still, I feel like we are more likely to build this kind of app than the top apps. And these apps, they work well, they are very functional, but this don't really feel premium. And as you can see, they have a very generic UI. This feels like they barely put any effort, but most of the people, they put a lot of time on those. And they don't really have unified design system because they are inspired by material design. They are inspired by human interface guideline from Apple. They see some really fancy UI from design Twitter, and they get inspired from everywhere. And they put everything in one canvas box. And obviously, they miss platform convention because they are not aware of what actually works and how it works on both of the platforms. I guess three of the platforms. And the biggest problem of all is a lot of us come from web background. Some of us from Flutter and everywhere. And because of that, a lot of think web as a canvas where we can draw. That's how we think. And it makes sense. That is why all these apps looks like this. But today, we will move from those to these kind of apps. So in the next 20 to 25 minutes, we'll try to, all the stuff that I have, I'll try to share, and we'll try to build apps like this. So our agenda for today is the best practice playbook, what I have noticed from all the top apps, and we'll also be talking about improving the design sense as an engineer. Let's talk about the best practice playbook. Obviously, there could be 20s and 50s in numbers, but I have only collected about 10 so that we can fit in this talk. So these are what I call the 10 principles that makes the top apps feel really premium. So we'll try to go through all of those one by one and see why the top app really feel that premium. First of all, respect the platform. What could it mean, right? Like, why do we need to respect a platform that we are building? Because of one of these, we'll talk more about why we should be respecting. And look at this chart over here. The retention rate for Android and iOS devices are well over 90%. So this means all of your users are very much familiar with, the iOS design system and material design system. My mom, she doesn't know what segment control is, but she can tell from muscle memory what it does. Same with my dad may not know what popover means, but he knows that this is where there will be some content or some buttons or whatever, right? So, and same goes with our brand loyalty. As a developer, we might switch around our devices, but that doesn't mean your user, frequently changes their device. It's very rare for a user to change the device and the platform. So the brand loyalty is just as high as you can tell. And another chart, as you can see, it's as I said, it's very rare for a user to change their platform. So this really means it. So we have to make sure we respect the platform. So how do we respect, though? We have enough convincing stats and reasons for why we should be respecting it. But how do we do that? First of all, the native design systems are out there. They are not just PDF. They are not just boring text. They are built because billions of money has been spent on the UX. They have done thousands of A/B tests for us. So these are all free material for all of us. But these are not very utilized, especially within the React Native community. And they are so great at convincing people, convincing user, because I think the iOS 26 is going to come out in the next few months, and whatever you have built with the native design system, it's going to adapt itself. So the next time, on the next release, we may have a very different component, right? And then our app is going to have that component without any lines of changes of code. And one more reason is the best engineer that you know of, Fernando, Evan, Mark, they are very obsessed with native feel. They truly care about the native feel, but most of us don't. And there is a desperancy about how we approach the best designs. And as I said, it's always the native elements are always better than JS-based element. I remember, I think 2 years back, I shared a post on Reddit and where I asked people, hey, I think at the time we did not have support for medium detain for the presentation model in iOS, and I asked people, how do we do something like that? Eventually, I passed it around and made it work. But during that period, I think I received like 20 comments. All the people were calling me stupid because I was looking for, like, there are Garam bottom sheet, or there are this and that package. And that happens because we do not understand the platform convention. Many of us on that comment section did not know that the presentation was available within the iOS. So this kind of problem happens because we do not understand the platform. We build for iOS, we build for Android, but we do not understand the fundamental principle. And these are some of the great examples. The Zigo burnt Galeria from Fernando is a great example of how we should be building. And the bottom tabs from Colistack is also a great example. And now there should be no excuse for us to build something like this. I think last year, Fernando gave a talk about we should not be afraid to build native libraries. Now I think it's more than easier to build native package. It takes you maybe 10 minutes to create a package for you to make it work natively with the native elements. And Expo UI is another great example. I think we're moving in a very good direction. I think we have a bunch of components already in the alpha phase. I think it's going to be super great. I think this is the future we should be looking forward to. Now let's talk about routing and layouts. This one right here is one of the most underrated features that I see missing on most of our apps. The best app out there, they heavily utilize share route. Why? Why? Because think of this way. Let's say you have a 2 tab, and user opens one of your video or post details. And if they don't see any the tab navigation at the bottom, they have 2 choices. They can either go back, or they can just go to home screen. If your content or the app is not as good, their muscle memory is just going to close the app, because it's easier to just close the app than going back, right? So that is why all the best apps, Apple needs, X app, all those great apps, they always have share route. So you could talk to somebody on a DM while you give them option to go to other routes as well. So you could go to home screen, browse some feed, go back to the DM, talk to the same person, or whatever. There's so many freedom out there with share route. And platform-specific layouts. I think another problem I see is a lot of our apps, we only brag about code reusability. But when it comes to platform-specific layout, I think we really do not need to worry about the code reusability. We should instead focus on building a platform-specific layout. So that way, you always think of building best app for each of the platform. That way, you can build the best layout, 2-column, 3-column for the web. Or you could build, a best-looking navigation for your mobile. So it shouldn't limit you to, the layout single file shouldn't limit you how your apps will look like. You should always worry about how do you build best, and then come towards coding later. So I think that's the approach we should be focusing on. And obviously, we just talked about that. And explore router UI. I think we see a lot of talk in Twitter where people say, I think AI needs a new kind of UI, or this is kind of boring. I think this is where it could work great. I think explore router UI exposes a lot of our hooks for us, similar to navigation, but we have that flexibility to do anything. So we shouldn't be afraid to try new navigation patterns as well. And another problem I see is, I think this is one of the most crucial one. The best app, they almost never use safe area view. Why? Because they like to control from all the way top to bottom. I think this is one of the problem we have. We always like to slap the safe area view and do cool stuff there. But the problem with that is that way we do not have control over our the top bar and bottom bar. So that's one of the problems. I think instead, we should always try to go with inset top and inset bottom. You could do with margin or padding, whatever works best for you. This way, you can create that immersive feeling and doesn't feel like like a canvas. And I think that is one of our problem as well. And let's talk about this one. They all share the same pattern. As you can see over there, they all have a great navigation. It's very fluid. User can see the context, like when they click on music or post, they can see that immersiveness going from one screen to the other one. And this is something we rarely utilize. It's share element transition. I know it was kind of broken on the previous Expo version. I think now it's going great. I think a couple of bugs, but I think now it's pretty stable to work. So we shouldn't limit ourselves for something like this, because as you can see, all the best apps, they all utilize share transition. And best thing is, it only takes you one line of code. That's it. Share transition tag is tag name. And this is all we need. It's a one line of code that instantly brings the immersiveness within our app. And obviously, you could see on Pinterest, they have a different transition style, and you have that freedom as well with the reanimated. And let's talk about one-hand use. As you can see from all the stats, I think most of us are always on our phone with our one. And it's very rare for us to be in two phone, maybe in typing, maybe we are in a bed or whatever. But most of the time, we are in train or driving. I'm not suggesting you to play with your phone while driving, but that's what happens, right? So we're mostly with our one hand, is all the stats back it up. And as you can see, this is one of the best patterns that it's very hard for me to notice this one because you have to really, once you start building, then you can realize. And this is something we never do this. This is, what they do is, it's any of your detail screen from all the top apps. Maybe we don't realize because they have built it such a nice way. But almost all the top apps detail screen, not the list or tabs, but all the details, your music details or your content details. All these apps likes to put those in custom model. So they put the model and they make it such a way that it's very, very intuitive to go back. So you could just drag it down. You could, it can work great as well when you are scrolling. You don't want to drag it down because it's going to collide with your scroll. So you go all the way top. You detect the top when the user is at the top of the screen. Then you let the user drag down. So all these apps do that. So we should not be afraid of the model. In fact, this should be the standard. At least in the top apps, it's the standard. So I don't know why we are stopping ourselves from this. And the least work we can do is at least have a horizontal gesture that is optimized for the whole width of the screen. So similar to X app or Blue Sky, they do it well. You can just go back with just a gesture from anywhere. You don't have to go all the way to the edge because the phone are getting bigger. And it's very hard, especially if you have a small hand like mine, it's very hard to go back. So you could just go back very easily. And we could just do that with one line of code in React navigation. It just you could just put forgot the keyword, but there's I think it's the length or whatever. I forgot the name, but there's just one line of props that you can pass, and it's going to take the full width. And another thing is, all the base tab, they like to put stuff at the bottom. Maybe 20, 30, 40% of the bottom part of the screen. Why? Because it's, as I said, they really care about one-hand use, and it's very easy for you to, click and filter and drop down, figure out what is the most important part of your screen is, and try to put the button at the bottom part. If you have multiple, like maybe you are, say, maybe you have a super app where you have a to-do list and notes. Maybe you want to have a fab button that will just put two of the button there once they click. So these are some great examples. And normally, what I see on the top app, there are two types of flavors for the sticky elements. One is obviously global fab, that is like something like X app, where they have plus button, where you can post from anywhere. Those are something I call static sticky tab. Fab. And we also have a smart sticky. So this means when you go to the details screen, there might be a table. User might select a couple of items, and they might want to filter or whatever. You just want to have that option. Like if they are talking to an AI, like they might want to switch some model at the bottom. So these are more of a smart sticky. They have more context from the current screen. So that's why I call it smart sticky. And obviously, you need to make sure they are good enough for the clicks. It's easy for a user to click if they can see that it's clickable. Or at least the listing, not often it can work great, because there are times where you have a very small space, and you want to let user click it, and you put some padding there, and the button, the text or the icon of the button moves further on the left, and it doesn't look nice. So for such cases, we can try to utilize hit slop, where we can have touchable without a feedback, or you could just put some absolute position. So it can still at least be 44 points, so it's clickable. It's a great UX-friendly way to solve that issue. Now, let's talk about context-aware experience. So these are what I call makes a premium app premium, one of the key experience. Let's talk about app muscle memory. What is it? Like humans, the app, as a builder, maker of the app, you have all the context. You know what user type. You know where user has scrolled. You know how much user has watched the video. All the top apps, they all utilize the muscle memory. They know that this is super important because most of us are lazy. When we see something like this pop up in our home timeline, then we click. Otherwise, we are never going to find this stuff there. As I said, they remember context, helps you pick up exactly where we were, and obviously minimizes friction, so we don't have to go to history and search that video and all that crazy stuff. And they are obviously intent aware. So if the user is in, post details, we might see we might take them to a certain scroll position based on what they did previously. And a YouTube video is a great example as well. And where do we store this data? Normally, we want to store the muscle memory is, I'll say, it's super important for your app. And there can be hundreds of muscle memories. And you need to make sure your muscle memory is in a place where it's very fast, because it needs to be very, it doesn't delay your app experience, and it's not asynchronous. Try to make sure it's, sync and it's real time, and you have a proper hooks for this so that it's reactive all across the app. So MMKB from Mark is a great example. I highly recommend using something like that for this. And obviously, they also do well with the server data. Like YouTube stores all the stuff of your watch time and everything from the server, and they pull that to the front end. Another great example is color adaptive. I'm just going to drink a little bit. So what is color adaptive? It's what I call sampling color from the user current context that brings that immersiveness within your app. These are some examples from Amazon, from Apple Music, and there are plenty of examples everywhere. YouTube has an ambient blur view when you open up the video. They have that great experience. Netflix does that as well. So all these apps, they utilize the current context. They really care about the user experience. And obviously, as we discussed, there are many different examples. And one great way to bring that experience is there is a great package called React Native Image Colors, where you can pass your image or video, asset, and then it will just give you the primary color, tertiary, secondary, all those colors. So try to bring that immersiveness. What I normally like to do is extract that primary color and figure out whether it's a dark or a light color, and just reverse that and make the other text opposite of the primary color. But obviously, I think that takes a little bit of time. It works fine if you have few images, few content, but when you have a long list, or like Spotify, where you have a podcast list, you have a different color with a long list. It may not work well. So all the great apps, like this app, they always try to pull the data from the server itself, so it doesn't lag your app. So make sure you pull those from the server, and this is just a backup for you, just in case if you don't have it. Now let's talk about reach guided text states. Sorry. So it's smart default. When you are at work, it's 5 p.m. Uber doesn't use any crazy ML or AI stuff for that. They just know it's 5 p.m. They just know your address. So it's very easy for them to just put the go to home link, right? It's very easy. You have all this data. You should be heavily utilizing it. Similar to that, you know where the user is. You know what the user time is. So instead of saying just hi, Saul, just have it good morning, Saul, good evening, Saul. That brings that personal touch and makes it feel more home to the users. And progressive state updates. So we know spinner are often bad. I mean, it's normalized by Apple. I think one of their problem with the UX is spinner, but because the user are so used to it, it's there, and I consider it a bad UX. But the good one are skeleton-based UI. You know the UI, what it looks like, you just have it skeleton. But this is just good. How can we make this even better? The best apps, they have a very dynamic skeleton. We know that as a user, we see it's a skeleton, but there are a lot of things happening. For example, if you make a post on Instagram, they have a very different dynamic skeleton and progressive. They can tell you when it's being uploaded. They can also give you when it's updating, like converting, all those cool stuff. So there is more of, like, as we know, there is always multi-steps, right? So it's not always direct, sending to the server and getting the data back. So we always have some steps. So that makes user feel, like it's happening, and the next one is up and coming, and that brings that immersiveness as well. And another one is purposeful empty states. So instead of, one of our problem is when I see some of our apps, I see a list, and I've just downloaded the app, and I see the chat screen, and I say there are no chat yet, and there is nothing. So it's very boring, So instead of that, try to make it more personalized. Like you can have a button, or we can have start a chat button or something else, like explore X and Y and Z and whatever. So every screen of your apps will fight for one another to bring that, attention from the user. And similar to the internet, I think we do great in terms of caching, but not everybody does this. I think most of our app, they never utilize cached content. If it's coming from the server, make sure you are, caching the content, at least show something. It's going to be difficult when you are online and you try to search. It makes sense we don't have a local database. But if your app makes sense to have a local database and have some sync server, the local first app could be a great choice as well. And I feel like 3 out of 4 times nowadays, I feel like local first is a great way to build apps. Let's talk about blur. These are some of the good blur, but I think there could have been a lot. Maybe I still have some bad ones as well to know what is a bad blur and what is a good blur. But normally, we need to make sure we balance the tint and intensity. We cannot just slap the tint and intensity and call it a day. That's not how it works. And normally, without any context, what we can say is the thicker the intensity, the thicker the tint, the better UI it looks. I know we want to show users some of the blur effect, but that isn't always the case. I think Apple does it great. They always make sure they have a thick intensity and thick tint. So make sure you do that. And obviously, the tint isn't always like a specific value. It depends on your theme and context. Make sure you flip. And I see a lot of apps where I flip to the dark mode and the tint is still white. So that instead of, if you really don't care about theming, just don't have the blur at all because it defeats the purpose. And another great one is a lot of great apps, they like to interpolate their blur intensity with the scroll position. So initially, you may have a 0 tint, and as you scroll down, you want to interpolate and bring that immersiveness within the app. So I think Apple does it everywhere. And obviously, it works great on button tabs, overlay buttons. They're really, like, if you don't know what you are doing, always slap a blur view with a thick intensity. I'm sure your app is going to look great. But yeah. And obviously, this can look great for models, and if done right. And I think Apple Maps does as well. But they have, on the Apple Map, they have a very thick, I would say maybe 95, 97. It's very hard to tell it's a blur, but it's a blur. And as you said, and it also works great with the background gradient as well. Now let's talk about progressive blur. So this is something we have recently seen in the design Twitter in the last year or so, maybe 2 years. And this also is a great way to bring that immersiveness within your app. It pretty much follows the similar standard as the blur that we discussed. But yeah, I think William has a great a video on how to do blur with the Skia, so make sure you watch it. It's very, very straightforward. Now let's talk about tactile UX. What is tactile? Tactile is something when you have a touch and you feel that experience within your app. Second round of water. So I think haptics is one of our favorite feature on React Native or anywhere. But the problem with that is a lot of us create a component with a button, have a default haptics, and no matter where you click, whether it's an error or a success, everything feels the same haptics. Please don't do that. That's a very lazy way to do haptics. Instead of having that, just don't do it at all. Because the point of haptics is to give the immersive experience and a proper feedback to the user. And other one is a very good example of progressive haptics. Now it's being implemented by a lot of apps. Apple Music does it great. I highly recommend you guys trying out, where you feel that music beat on your phone without listening to music. So if you have a game or some video, you can do cool stuff with it. And sensors. I think this is one of the features we rarely utilize. We have health app. We have some artwork on our video and all that stuff, but we never really utilize it. We have so many options here. Gyroscope is a great example where Netflix and Apple Maps, they really love to utilize the feature where you can feel that tint and 3D-ness within the app, and there are some great other options as well. Try to at least look at the expose sensor and see what you could bring in your app and immediately bring that tactile experience. Now let's talk about custom branding. Obviously, I think it's not always you want to build a platform native component. It makes sense sometimes to have a custom branding. So when do you want to do fully custom design system? When does it make sense? Number one, it makes sense when you have games. They are supposed to be immersive. They don't really need to care about platform convention. They can just do whatever they want. They want to make sure it's visually, because they are naturally visually storytelling stuff. So you want to make sure the app games you don't really need to worry about the platform convention. You can go absolutely wild with it. And another one, which I think is most of us might be familiar with it, if you have a brand, say Tesla or SpaceX, where people just can tell your brand without even looking at the logo, that's where it works best. If you have a branding like Coinbase or some great apps out there, that's when it makes sense. That's when it makes sense to have a custom design system. And these are some great examples. Discord, Notion, they try to bring that same experience, same UI throughout the platform. That's where it makes sense. If you are an indie dev, if nobody knows you, there is no reason for you to go fancy because platform-specific design is always going to win in that scenario. Now let's talk about animations. We have a talk tomorrow from Enzo about animation. Maybe he can dive more deeper. But I'm just going to go through the high level of what is a good practice. Number one is please don't overcook. I think that is one of our problems. I think a lot of us just recently learned animation, or I don't know, for whatever reason, we put animated screens, animated buttons, everything is animated. It's like you just paid user $1 million and please watch my app. That's not going to happen. User can immediately feel that, it's overcooked feeling, So before we get started, just make sure we don't overcook. Another one is animation is one of the places where it is best fit for animation feedback. So it could be, this one is a great example from Cash App where you type number and there is a limit, some amount, and as they type in, it's 6. So you can clearly tell. I can tell. Everybody can tell that was something happened, maybe the limit or whatever. So the problem with us is we try to have a model or some alert. Instead of that, try to think of ways to animate very subtle animation that can give that feedback. It could be sick, tilt, or it could really be anything. The opportunity is endless on animations. And another problem is we think a lot about animating, fade in or slide in or whatever. But we often forget the other in part. So it's animated, it's sliding from up to down very nicely, but when it goes out, it's like static. So that's one of the boring experience you can tell. I think a lot of it does that. A lot of do that. And that's something we should try to focus on as well. Because if you have done great job with inner animation, I'm sure you can do the outer as well. And the other stuff is it works great with gestures, pick and pop, or long press, swipe, pins. There are so many ways we can animate and make our app very, very, this is somewhat of a tactile experience as well if done well with, if this works well with the haptics, this can be a great tactile feeling as well. And obviously, if you have a long list or something fancy, you might want to utilize the sequential and stagger, where you can tell as the user is scrolling down, it considers the position or item index of the index of the item, and it tries to slowly slide in or whatever that animation is, and it brings that depth. So this is something we can do it, but again, please don't overcook. And another one is micro animation. What are micro animation? They are usually very subtle, very small. They don't really do a lot of crazy stuff. As you can see, there are some cool animation out there. Build some custom one, as you can see. Flutter is bad, by the way. And as you can see, they are very purposeful. They bring that energy. They bring that feedback. And it's very subtle. None of them are very flashy or overdone, right? And usually they are great for action feedbacks. When you have states, you want to notify user without showing alert or whatever, and you just have a very subtle animation. And micro animations could be a collection of micro animation itself. So it's a subset of micro animation. So as you can see, the first one, there are a bunch of micro animations together, but that is still a micro animation. And as I said, it works great with haptics if done well. And confirmation, this will bring that energy. They should feel that, users will feel that they succeeded on something. And obviously, the error, make sure you can give them some feedback. And it's a two-way communication, and it's just, hopefully, it's not the one way. Let's talk about spacing and tokens, where we are a lot of struggle with. The best apps, they always have a very very strict point-based system. Unlike us, where we say Tailwind or Native Wind, where we try to utilize a lot of 4, 5, 10, 8, whatever number, we just go wild, whatever looks great. We think that's the best way. But they always stick with a very specific, tiny amount of point system. They usually have primary, just like colors. They have primary, secondary, tertiary, like maybe 4 or 5. That's all they have. If you look at any apps, they try to avoid box shadows. They try to avoid borders, because the language the spacing token speaks is much bigger than, say, box shadows. So make sure you limit yourself and don't go too wild with it. And another one is hierarchy. You have to understand what is the most important part of your screen is, and try to stick with that. And see, as you can see, this is a classic example where I'm sure most of us read in that way, unless, I'm sure most of us read the exact way that I read. So it does matter. Like, you have to figure out what is the most important part of your app and try to go from there. And another problem is, I think I see a lot of apps just going wild with the icons. That is another massive problem. We go with material icons, and somewhere we find iron icons, and another one, and feature icon, whatever. And there's just when I open the app, it's just wild. Everywhere, different icons. You can feel that difference. Our users, even though they do not understand any of these, they are much more exposed to the best app than our apps. So they know from the muscle memory what makes a difference. And negative spacing. This is one of the best examples where best apps utilize the primary content of the screen, or wherever they want to prioritize, they use negative spacing a lot. So that's something you want to keep in mind. And another one is please don't spam. We just like to put box shadows everywhere, and even though it is supposed to be hierarchical, we always put box shadows in the list item, and even though they are the same family of list, they all have a box shadows and it looks very ugly. For us, it might look fancy, but from the UX perspective and user perspective, it's not very easy to scan through. And same with borders, same with gradient, and same with border radius. Try to have a very limited set of tokens for everything and stick with it. Now, let's talk about how we can improve our design sense as an engineer. I think most of the principles will work great, but there are still ways we can improve ourselves every day. Oops, my time is up. Am I going to have to skip it? Well, they let me speak, so OK. So how can we improve our design sense as an engineer? Number one, this, I think, is one of our biggest problems. We often isolate ourselves within a React Native community, and we don't really interact with Swift or Kotlin or even Flutter. Everywhere, I think most of us are very isolated. So I think most of the best engineers out there, they are very exposed to all the platforms. They want to learn every day. So make sure you are exposed to best designers, best UX engineers, best Swift developers, best Swift Kotlin developers. Don't be afraid with that. So I think that really helps a lot to bring that perspective. Another one is constraint gym that I just discussed. I want you guys to try something. So when you go home, try to build a screen. Limit yourself with only a couple of tokens. Don't play with any color. See how far you can get. I think that really tells you where you are with the design. I think if you can build a nice interface with just a couple of colors and a couple of tokens, that's a great way to start. That's how you know where you are. Because any great engineers will be able to build absolutely awesome interface with just 2 tokens. Another one is which I think is a great way to build your design sense. Try to look at one of the screens of the best app, just one single screen, maybe a Saturday, Sunday, and what you want to do is just look at the screen, give yourself maybe 30 minutes, 60 minutes, try to build it. And after 60 minutes, see how close they are with one another. Try to clone everything, the icons, every little details, that really matters. I think after 30 minutes, you'll realize the difference in your design sense. I think that will be a great way to understand where you are. And going further, I would recommend maybe put a timer, look at the screen for 15 seconds, don't do anything, just keep on looking at the screen. And after that, you want to keep the screen. You don't want to look at it. And just from your muscle memory, try to build that and see how far you can go. I think that really helps understand where you are as well. And obviously, there are so many UX books. They are not specific to React Native or mobile app. They work great, and these really help you understand from the broad sense of how user really think. There are so many great books. I highly recommend reading those. And obviously, this is one of the important stuff. Like even the best apps that we talk about the custom branding, they still respectfully bend platform convention. You might see a model in Tesla app. You might see a very different app in a custom branding in Tesla, but they still try to utilize the model we have in a native platform. And other great example is Netflix, where they load a model. They still are somewhat respecting the platform for the model, even though the model looks very different, right? Under the hood, they still try to keep that convention. So yeah, we have that opportunity, but make sure you still respect the platform. And another one is we often build app and look at the simulator. It works great and fine, and that is one of the issues. When we release the app, there are so many stuff. You don't feel that tactile experience. Something feels up. So even though you don't want to load your physical phone every second, maybe you want to do it on a weekend or so once in a while, see where your app progresses. I think that will really help you understand where the user is going to feel. That's something we rarely do. And this is another great example. I think a lot of us like to build super app, and super app, like any business, when we try to do too much, it almost always fails. Just like that, the app, when we are building, we like to build our best app ever, and we put so many stuff there, and it's all over the place, and it's either never going to be released or it's going to be clumsy. And I think X app is a great way, great example where they had such a great app and they have messed it up because they want to be super app. So you want to be very careful. And think in chunks. I think this is more of a development, like how you want to build. Like I personally am, I really feel good in terms of building in chunks. So that means, let's say, a very immersive model, right? I want to build in such a way that my all the features are very isolated. So including the states, including any storage, any component that it stays in a feature folder. So in the next app, I can just copy that folder and just use it like a package. So it's very handy. It works great for a small app. It works great for big apps, and I think AI is pretty good at understanding those kind of code base. So make sure you have feature base where you have states, storage, everything in one place for that component. And one other way to build our design sense is getting inspired. There are so many ways we can inspire. This is something from outside from UX books. There are some great examples like Mobin, where we have a real life screenshot from the App Store. They have done such a great job. And there are some other stuff like Figma, where they have a complete design system and examples and Arrive, Spline. There are just so many ways. I think we have so many Twitter accounts where they have share great experience, and I think that will help a lot of us. So we have to understand the real world patterns as well. And niche knowledge is also very important. If you are building an app for a certain niche, you have to understand what the best app on that niche is. So they may break some conventions. You might want to learn from them, and I think a lot of advice can be different depending on the need. So make sure you consider that as well. And another one is a great way to learn is App Store reviews. I like to read the best apps and their reviews as well, like what people are telling about that app. There are a lot of complaints about Netflix or Twitter app that people don't see, but when you go to the App Store, they have such a gold mine there. It's one of the best ways to learn UX experience. Thank you.